The alarm siren wailed through the corridors of Earth's United Nations Space Command headquarters. And Captain John Hayes did not flinch. He was standing at the observation window, watching the city lights of New Geneva spread below him like fallen stars. The message had arrived 40 minutes ago, and everyone who heard it understood that the world had changed forever. Dr. Emma Wilson rushed into the command center with a stack of data tablets in her arms. Her face was pale, her hands trembling slightly as she approached the round table where Admiral Christopher Blake sat, studying the transmission Emma had dedicated her entire life to the dream of peaceful contact with alien civilizations. And now that dream was turning into a nightmare. The message came from Kepler Station, humanity's oldest deep space colony. 300,000 kilometers from Earth. Commander Richard Foster had sent the warning personally, his voice steady even as he delivered news that made every human on Earth hold their breath. The Vorthan Empire was coming, and they were coming to end humanity. Admiral Blake looked up from the tablet, his gray eyes tired and heavy. He had commanded the human space forces for 12 years, and in that time, he had built the fleet into the Phaeton, strongest military presence humans had ever achieved. But all of that might mean nothing against what was coming. The Vorthan Empire had ruled the galaxy for 3,000 years. They had encountered hundreds of species, absorbed dozens into their dominion, and crushed anyone who dared to resist them. The Queen of the Vorthans had never lost a war, and her weapons were so advanced that human technology looked like children's toys in comparison. John Hayes finally turned from the window and took his seat at the table. Everyone in the room knew his record, his victories against impossible odds. They all believed that if anyone could find a way through this darkness, it would be him. Emma placed the translation of the full Vorthan message on the table where everyone could see it. The words were terrifying in their absolute certainty. The Vorthan Queen declared that humanity was too unpredictable, too dangerous, and too different from the ordered civilizations she controlled. She had therefore decided that all human settlements would be destroyed, and the human population would either be enslaved or eliminated. The message was delivered as if it was a simple administrative decision, like closing an office or transferring resources 72 hours. The message said that was how long humanity had before. The first Vorthan attack fleet entered Earth orbit 72 hours to prepare for the end of the world. As they knew it, Admiral Blake leaned back in his chair and crossed his arms over his chest. The other military commanders in the room were already talking about evacuation protocols and defensive positions. They were brilliant people, but they all understood one basic truth. Humanity could not win a direct military conflict with the Vorthan Empire. The gap in technology was simply too vast. John Hayes listened to them speak for several minutes before he raised his hand. The room fell silent because they knew that when John Hayes wanted to speak, it was usually important. He had always been the kind of man who said very little, but made every word count. I do not think we should fight them with weapons, Hayes said slowly, his voice calm and measured. The room erupted in confused conversations. How else could they fight an enemy that was already on its way? Evacuation would save some people, maybe a few million, but the Vorthan Queen had already declared her intention to hunt humanity across the galaxy. There would be no safe place to hide. Hayes looked directly at Admiral Blake. What if we did not run and we did not fight, but instead we changed her mind? Emma Wilson leaned forward with sudden interest. She had always believed that communication was the key to solving conflicts between species. Diplomacy had never failed her before, even when the odds seemed impossible. But Queen Shiara has never been diplomatic with anyone. Admiral Blake said, she sees other species as either servants or obstacles. Why would she listen to humans? Because she has never met a human. Hayes replied, she sees us as a problem to eliminate. not as individuals worth meeting if I could get to her. If I could stand in front of her and speak, maybe I could make her see us as something more than just another species to conquer. The Admiral shook his head slowly. You would be walking directly into the most dangerous place in the galaxy, possibly to your death. The Vorthen Throne world is surrounded by defenses that would kill you in seconds, I know. Hayes said simply. He stood and walked to the star map on the wall. Tracing his finger along the path that would take him to Vorthen Prime, Emma was watching him with an expression that mixed hope and concern. She knew better than anyone what he was proposing, and she knew that it might actually be the only chance humanity had if I can reach the Queen before the attack begins. Hayes continued, if I can prove that humans are worth something more than destruction, then maybe we have a future. Maybe we have a chance. The room was silent for a long time, every person in that command center understood that John Hayes was proposing a mission that had almost no chance of success, but they also understood that it was the only idea anyone had that offered any hope at all. Admiral Blake stood and extended his hand to Hayes. If you are going to do this, you will need the best team we have, the best ship we have, and you will need to leave in the next 6 hours. Hayes shook his hand firmly. Then we had better get started. As the Admiral left the room to begin preparations, Emma Wilson approached Hayes. She had worked with him on diplomatic missions before, and she knew that he was one of the few humans who could face an alien queen and not be afraid. You really believe you can change her mind? Emma said quietly. Hayes looked out the window again at the city below, at all the millions of people who would die if this failed. I have to believe it, he replied, because the alternative is that humanity ends in 72 hours. And I cannot accept that. Emma nodded and went to begin her own preparations. She would create the diplomatic papers, the statements of human achievement, the evidence that humanity deserved a place in the galaxy as equals. She would give Hayes every possible argument, every fact, every reason why Queen Shiara should choose peace instead of war. But as the night fell over New Geneva, Captain John Hayes stood alone in the observation deck, looking out at the stars somewhere out there in the darkness between worlds. An ancient queen was making final preparations for the extinction of humanity, and somewhere on Earth, one man was preparing to fly toward her, hoping that the human spirit, human courage, and human determination might be enough to change her mind. He did not know if it would work, but he knew that he had to try. The Vorthen Throne world hung in space like a jewel carved from crystal and starlight. From the observation window of the small human diplomatic vessel, Captain Hayes could see the massive towers that rose from the planet's surface, each one tall enough to pierce the atmosphere. The structures were beautiful in a cold, perfect way that made them seem almost inhuman. But then, everything about the Vorthen civilization was inhuman. They had built their empire through precision, through absolute order, through the elimination of anything that did not fit their vision of galactic perfection. And now they wanted to eliminate humanity. The ship descended through the atmosphere, protected by a diplomatic corridor that Queen Shiara had reluctantly granted. Hayes had made the journey with only 5 companions: Emma Wilson, 2 military officers for protection, and 2 scientists who would help demonstrate human capabilities. It was a tiny delegation, but it was all they dared to bring to the enemy throne world. As the vessel landed on the crystalline platform outside the Queen's palace, Hayes took a moment to calm his breathing. He had prepared speeches in his mind, arguments about why humans deserved to live, why they were valuable to the galaxy. But now that the moment was here, he understood that words alone would not be enough. Queen Shiara would not be swayed by words from a species she had already decided to destroy. The palace doors were made of a material that seemed to shift between solid and liquid, and as Hayes approached them, they opened silently. The guards who flanked the entrance were tall and angular, their skin a metallic silver that reflected the light like mirrors. They did not speak to Hayes or acknowledge his presence in any way. They simply watched him with eyes that had no pupils. Just endless black spaces. The throne room took Hayes' breath away. It was vast beyond measure, with the ceiling so high that it disappeared into darkness. The queen sat upon a throne that seemed to be carved from a single piece of crystal, and her presence filled the entire space like a physical force. Queen Shiara was beautiful in the way that a storm is beautiful, dangerous and terrible and magnificent all at once. Her skin was the color of deep water, and her eyes glowed with an intelligence so vast that Hayes felt small just looking at her. She had ruled the galaxy for over 200 years, and every moment of that rule was written into her face. Hayes approached and knelt, because that was what protocol demanded, and because he understood that this first moment mattered more than anything else. When he rose, he looked directly into those glowing eyes. "Your Majesty," he began, "I am Captain John Hayes of the human civilization on the planet Earth. I have come to ask you to reconsider your decision to destroy my people." King Shiara made a sound that might have been laughter, or it might have been the sound of ice cracking. The other Vorthan nobles and lords who lined the throne room also reacted with amusement, as if a small creature had just made a desperate attempt to bargain for its life. "You have come to ask me to reconsider," she said, her voice echoing through the chamber. "You, a representative of a species that has barely left your own planet, have come to my throne world to convince me that your people deserves to exist. This is either extremely courageous or extremely foolish." I have not yet decided which. Hayes did not flinch. Even though his heart was racing so fast he thought it might burst through his chest. "I understand how this must seem to you, Your Majesty," he said calmly, "but I ask you to consider one thing. You have never met a human before this moment. You know of us only through reports and assessments. You have not seen us face to face, and you have not understood what we are." Queen Shiara rose from her throne, and the entire chamber fell silent. She descended the crystal steps with deliberate slowness, and as she approached Hayes, he could feel the weight of her power, the knowledge that she could destroy him with a single gesture. But he stood firm, and he did not look away. "You are correct," she said finally, studying him as if he were an interesting puzzle. "I have not met a human before, and I do not like being surprised. Yet here you are, surprising me already by daring to speak to me as if we were equals. Humans are rare in my experience. Most species crumble at my approach. They beg and they plead and they offer me everything they have in hopes of mercy. But you are different. You do not beg." "I do not beg because my people are worth more than begging," Hayes replied. "We come from a world that is harsh and dangerous, a place where every day is a struggle for survival. That struggle has made us strong in ways that transcend mere physical power. We are adaptable, creative, and determined. We do not give up, even when the odds are impossible." A Vorthan general stepped forward. His name was Lord Kethis, and his face was twisted with anger. "Your Majesty, this is a waste of your time," he said. "We should destroy this human and every human that has ever lived. They are nothing compared to our power." But Queen Shiara held up a hand, and Lord Kethis fell silent immediately. She returned to her throne, her eyes never leaving Hayes. "I am going to give you a chance," she said, "but not the chance you came here asking for. There will be a series of trials, tests of combat, strategy, and intelligence. Your species will participate, and if you prove yourselves worthy, I will reconsider my decision. But if you fail, I will destroy humanity without hesitation. And I will do it the knowledge that your species was given a fair opportunity. The trials will begin in 3 days." Hayes felt a surge of hope, though he kept his expression controlled. This was more than he had dared to hope for when he began this mission. A chance was all he had asked for, and now they had one. The Queen gestured dismissively, and guards appeared to escort Hayes and his delegation from the throne room as he walked toward the exit. He heard Queen Shara's voice echo after him. "You are interesting, human." She said, "I look forward to watching you fail. It has been a very long time since I saw something original. I would like to see if that originality translates to any form of competence." Hayes did not respond. But as he left the throne room, he understood that something had shifted. They had passed the first test. They had made Queen Shara curious. And curiosity was emotion that even ancient alien monarchs could not ignore. It was a small victory, but it was a victory nonetheless that night. In the chambers that had been provided for the human delegation, Emma Wilson found Hayes standing at the window, looking out at the city of crystal towers below. She stood beside him in silence for a moment before speaking. "She did not destroy you," Emma said finally. "No," Hayes replied. "She did not. But the real trials are just beginning. We have 3 days to prepare for something we do not fully understand, and the future of all humanity rests on what happens in those trials." Emma placed her hand on his shoulder, and together they watched the alien city sparkle in the darkness far away on Earth. Millions of humans were going to sleep, unaware that their fate was being decided on a distant world. They did not know that they were living in the final hours before everything changed. They did not know that one man and his small team were all that stood between them and extinction. The Arena of Champions was a vast circular structure that could hold 10,000 spectators. And on the first day of the trials, every seat was filled. The Vorthan nobility had come to watch the humans fail. And with them came representatives from dozens of other alien species, all curious to see what this small human delegation could possibly do against the greatest warriors and strategists in the known. Galaxy Captain Hayes stood in the center of the arena floor, and facing him was Vorthan champion Krex, a warrior who had not lost a single combat in over 300 years. Krex was twice Hayes. Height in his body was made of muscle that seemed to move with mechanical precision. The crowd was silent, waiting for the human to be destroyed. When the signal sounded, Krex charged forward with a roar that shook the arena. His first strike was so fast that most creatures could not even follow it with their eyes. But Hayes had trained his entire life, not against beings like Krex, but against the harsh terrain and brutal challenges of Earth. He had learned to move with efficiency, to waste no motion, to understand how his body worked when every second counted. Hayes dropped low and rolled to the side, allowing Krex's massive blow to pass harmlessly over his head. As the Vorthan champion tried to recover, Hayes drove his fist into the warrior's midsection with every ounce of strength he possessed. The blow landed, and for the first time in 300 years, Krex staggered backward. The crowd erupted in shocked silence, which was somehow louder than any cheer could have been. Queen Shara sat in her private viewing booth, and Hayes could see that her expression had changed. She was no longer amused. She was interested. Battle raged for 20 minutes, and with each passing second, Hayes proved something fundamental about human nature. Humans could not match Vorthan's strength or speed in any individual moment. But humans had something that the Vorthans seemed to have lost: the ability to push beyond their own limits when it mattered. Hayes was bleeding, exhausted, and his muscles screamed in protest. But he kept fighting. When Krex landed a blow that cracked 2 of Hayes' ribs, Hayes laughed. "You are strong," Hayes said between gasps for breath. "But strength alone is not enough on my world. We do not give up." And with a final surge of determination that should have been impossible, Hayes drove Krex to his knees. The arena fell absolutely silent. Then, slowly, Queen Shara rose from her chair. The next day brought the strategic trials, and Commander Lisa Park stood in a holographic simulation chamber with Vorthan General Theron. The simulation created a galactic war scenario, and the two commanders had to navigate a complex military situation with limited resources. Theron had fought in 1,000 real wars, and he knew every tactic, every strategy, every possible maneuver. But Lisa Park came from a world where humans had learned to survive through unconventional thinking, while Theron expected her to make the logical moves, to follow the patterns that all great military minds before her had followed. Lisa instead made choices that seemed almost reckless. She left her strongest position undefended, sacrificed her most advanced units, and took risks that no experienced commander would ever take. Theron was confused by her strategy. He expected her to fail, but then the simulation shifted. Her unexpected moves had put her in a position where Theron's next logical move would walk directly into a trap. When he realized what had happened, it was too late. Lisa had defeated him using something Theron did not possess: the ability to think in completely new ways. She had not outthought him with experience, but with imagination. By the third day, the pattern was clear. Dr. Marcus Chun competed in the scientific trials and solved problems that had stumped Vorthan scientists for generations. He did not have their knowledge or their advanced technology, but he had something more valuable. He had the ability to ask questions that the Vorthans had stopped asking centuries ago. He had curiosity and wonder. The Vorthan civilization was built on the foundation of perfection. To order, they had created a system that worked, and they had refined it for 3,000 years. But in doing so, they had lost the capacity to think beyond their own established patterns. The humans, coming from a much younger civilization, still possessed the ability to see problems in new ways. When the trials ended, Queen Shiara did not announce a winner immediately. She sat in her throne room with her council for many hours, while Hayes and his delegation waited in their chambers, not knowing if they had done enough to save their people. The uncertainty was almost worse than knowing they had failed. Finally, Hayes was summoned back to the throne room. He walked with his head held high, knowing that whatever happened next, humanity had proven something important. They had proven that they were not the simple creatures the Vorthans had believed them to be. Queen Shiara sat on her crystal throne, and her expression was thoughtful. "You have surprised me again, human," she said. "Your people are not as weak as I believed, but survival is not determined by a few victories in contests. Survival is determined by what a species truly values, by what it is willing to fight for, and by the kind of future it envisions for itself." She paused, and Hayes felt the weight of the moment pressing down on him. "I want to understand your people better," she continued. "Before I make my final decision, I want to hear what you truly believe makes humanity worth preserving. Tomorrow night, you will speak before the full Galactic Council, and then I will decide whether the human species lives or dies." The Great Council chamber was larger than any building Hayes had ever seen. The ceiling stretched so far above that it seemed like the sky itself had been brought indoors. The representatives of 300 alien species sat in concentric circles, all watching as Hayes was escorted to the center of the chamber. Queen Shiara sat on a throne that dominated the highest point of the chamber, overlooking everything like a god. Hayes looked around at the assembled aliens, and he saw fear in many of their expressions. The smaller species cowered in the presence of their more powerful neighbors. The weaker civilization sat in the back, invisible and powerless. The Vorthan Empire had built a galactic system based on strength and dominance, where might made right, and the powerful ruled the weak. "My name is Captain John Hayes of Earth," he began, his voice steady and clear. "I stand before you not to argue that humans should survive, but to speak to you about what kind of galaxy we choose to build together." He paused, letting his words settle into the chamber. "I have learned in my time here that your civilization is built on the principle of perfection through dominance. The strong rule, and the weak serve or perish. For 3,000 years, this system has worked, and Queen Shiara has maintained order across the galaxy through her supreme power. This is impressive, And this is efficient, but I ask you all to consider something when your children are born. What do you hope for them? Do you hope they will be strong enough to dominate others? Or do you hope they will be safe, happy, and surrounded by love? Humanity comes from a world that is harsh and unforgiving, but we do not survive because we are the strongest. We survive because we protect each other. We survive because when one of us falls, the others lift them up. We survive because we love our children and our families with a fierceness that cannot be measured in weapons or power. Hayes walked forward, his eyes meeting the eyes of representatives from different species on Earth. The strong do not simply destroy the weak. Instead, we build systems that protect everyone. We understand that a civilization is judged not by how much it conquers, but by how it treats those who are different, those who are vulnerable, those who cannot fight back. He turned to face Queen Shiara directly. I have learned that your civilization has never encountered true mercy, true compassion, and true cooperation. Every species in this chamber is afraid of each other. Every civilization protects itself through walls and weapons and fear. But humans understand that fear is not a foundation for lasting peace. Peace is built on trust, on the understanding that we are stronger when we work together than when we stand alone. The chamber had become absolutely silent. Hayes could see that his words were reaching them. Even the most hardened warriors and strategists were listening, but more importantly, he could see that Queen Shiara was listening. I will tell you what makes humanity valuable. Hayes continued, it is not our weapons, because we do not have your advanced technology. It is not our strength, because we are weaker than most of you. What makes humanity valuable is our capacity to choose compassion when we could choose cruelty. It is our ability to see potential in others and help them become their best selves. It is our willingness to sacrifice for those we love. And even for those we do not know. We are a young species, barely begun in our journey across the galaxy, but we carry something ancient and powerful in our hearts. We carry hope. And hope is the most dangerous and most valuable force in any galaxy. Species without hope eventually fall into despair and cruelty, but a species that carries hope can build wonders. If you destroy us, you destroy not an enemy, but a mirror in which you could see a better version of yourselves. We do not seek to conquer your galaxy, your majesty. We seek to live in it, to learn from it, and to share what we have learned in return. We seek to be friends instead of subjects. We seek to be partners instead of servants. Hayes took a breath, and he could feel the power of the moment. Everything had come down to this. Everything that humanity was or could ever be rested on the words. He was about to speak. I came to your throne world, believing that you were my enemy. He said softly, I came with fear in my heart and desperation in my soul. But as I have spent time here, I have come to understand that you are not evil. You are simply lonely. Your empire is built on domination because you believe that is the only way to maintain order. But what if there was another way? What if, instead of ruling through fear, you led through inspiration? What if you showed the galaxy that an ancient civilization could still learn, could still grow, could still change? He looked directly into Queen Shara's glowing eyes. I believe that humans have something to teach the galaxy, just as the galaxy has much to teach us, and I believe that you, your majesty, are wise enough to recognize that the greatest strength is not found in weapons or walls, but in the courage to build something new. For a long moment, there was complete silence in the council chamber. Then Queen Shara rose from her throne, and everyone in the chamber rose as well. A gesture of respect that Hayes understood meant something profound. She descended from her elevated position and walked to where Hayes stood. She was so close that he could feel the power radiating from her. You have moved me, human, she said, and her voice carried through the chamber like thunder. No one has spoken to me this way in 200 years. No one has dared to suggest that I could change, that I could choose a different path. But I believe you are correct. I believe it is time for my empire to transform." She extended her hand to Hayes, a gesture that seemed to shock every alien in the chamber. "I will not destroy your people, Captain John Hayes. Instead, I invite humanity into a new alliance with the Vorthan Empire. We will be partners, not masters and servants. We will learn from each other, and together we will build a galaxy that is based on cooperation instead of fear." The chamber erupted in sound, some cheering, some shouting in protest, some simply stunned into silence. But Hayes was only aware of one thing: his people would live. The future of humanity had just been born. 3 years had passed since Captain John Hayes stood before the Galactic Council and changed the course of history. The transformation that had begun in that council chamber had rippled outward, touching every civilization, every world, and every creature in the galaxy. The old order of domination and fear had given way to something new, something that many had thought was impossible. Admiral John Hayes now stood in the crystal gardens of Vorthan Prime, watching children play between the towering structures of light and mineral. The children were of mixed species, human and Vorthan, and a dozen others besides. They played together without fear, without hierarchy, without the weight of ancient prejudices bearing down on them. This garden was one of the first symbols of the new galaxy that Queen Shiara was building. The Queen herself approached, and the Admiral turned to greet her. She had changed in the 3 years since their first meeting. The coldness that had defined her for 200 years had been replaced by something warmer. Though still touched with the weight of leadership, she carried herself with dignity. But now it was the dignity of someone who had chosen a new path and committed fully. "Toiti was just thinking about our first meeting," Queen Shiara said as she stood beside Hayes. "I was going to destroy your entire species. You know, I had already decided it in my mind. You were a problem that needed to be eliminated, I know." "Your Majesty," Hayes replied. "I have always known." She turned to look at him, and a slight smile crossed her face. "The galaxy was not ready for what you offered," she said. "Most would have expected you to fight for your own survival. Instead, you fought for something greater than that. You fought for the possibility that the galaxy could be different back on Earth." Dr. Emma Wilson stood in the new United Nations Center for Interspecies Cooperation. The facility had been built with technology from 3 different civilizations, and it represented humanity's commitment to learning from the broader galaxy. Humans and aliens worked side by side, sharing research and ideas and dreams. The technologies being developed would have seemed like magic to people. From just 50 years earlier, Emma had received messages from colonies across human space. Young humans were being accepted into the advanced academies of a dozen different species. Humans were being recognized for their unique perspective and their ability to solve problems that others could not. But more importantly, humans were finally being seen as partners instead of problems. Commander Lisa Park had been appointed as commander of the Joint Human-Vorthan Defense Fleet, a force dedicated to protecting the galaxy from external threats and maintaining the fragile peace that Queen Shiara was nurturing. She had worked with Vorthan generals to develop new strategies that combined human adaptability with Vorthan discipline. The fleet was the strongest in the galaxy, but more importantly, it was based on cooperation and mutual respect. Dr. Marcus Chun had established a research institute dedicated to unlocking the potential of younger civilizations. The Vorthan archives contained the knowledge of 3,000 years of advancement, but they also contained the rigid thinking that came from having all the answers. Chun was helping the Vorthans rediscover the art of asking new questions, of pursuing knowledge not through accumulation, but through wonder. 3 months after Hayes first came to Vorthan Prime, a monument had been erected in the center of the capital city. It showed a human figure standing before a Vorthan queen, not as a subject before her ruler, but as an equal offering respect. The monument bore a simple inscription: the moment when fear became hope, when domination became partnership, when one small species proved that courage and compassion could change the galaxy. But Hayes did not think of himself as a hero. He was simply a human who had been given an opportunity, and he had chosen to speak the truth as he saw it. The real heroes were the millions of humans who had continued their lives on Earth, raising families and pursuing dreams even when extinction seemed certain. The real heroes were the aliens from dozens of species, who had decided to give cooperation a chance even though it meant dismantling systems that had defined their civilizations for millennia. As Admiral Hayes walked through the crystal gardens with Queen Shiara, he noticed something that would have been unthinkable 3 years earlier. Lord Kethis, the Vorthan general who had wanted to destroy humanity immediately, was teaching a group of young humans about Vorthan military strategy. He was stern and demanding, but there was something that looked almost like pride in his expression as he watched his students master new concepts. The old enmity had not been forgotten, but it had been transformed into respect and admiration. The Queen and the Admiral walked in silence for a long time, watching the children play and the adults work together in the gardens. Finally, Queen Shiara spoke, her voice carrying the weight of centuries. "You taught me something when you stood before me that first day," she said. "You showed me that I could choose to be different, that I could lead my empire not through fear but through inspiration. I thought that once you had served your purpose, you would return to Earth and I would rarely think of you again. But you changed not just my mind, Captain Hayes. You changed my heart." Hayes bowed respectfully. "Your Majesty, I simply spoke the truth as I understood it. The rest came from your willingness to listen." The Queen smiled, a genuine smile that showed she had learned not just diplomacy, but authentic emotion. "The legend will say that the legendary hero was born, and the alien queen trembled in fear," she said softly, "but the truth is different. The truth is that the legendary hero was born, and the alien queen learned to hope. And in that hope, the galaxy was remade that night, as the twin moons of Vorthan Prime rose in the sky." Captain John Hayes stood on the observation platform of his residence and looked out at the galaxy that sprawled before him. Somewhere out there was Earth, the small blue world that had given him life and purpose. Somewhere out there were millions of humans who would never know his name, but whose lives had been forever changed by his decision to walk toward danger instead of away from it. The future was uncertain, as all futures must be, but it was a future filled with possibility and hope instead of fear and despair. It was a future where a young species had proven that despite having less power and less technology, they possessed something more valuable: the courage to believe that change was possible. And in the crystal cities of Vorthan Prime, in the research facilities of human space, and in the ships that traveled between worlds, a new civilization was being born. It was not a human civilization or a Vorthan civilization. It was a galactic civilization built on the foundation that John Hayes had offered to Queen Shiara. The understanding that when we choose compassion over cruelty, when we choose cooperation over domination, when we choose hope over fear, we create something beautiful and strong and true. The legendary hero had been born, and the galaxy would never be the same.